So we're delighted to have Dave Slupe with us today. Dave is a certified financial advisor and director of Aging Consulting Group in Leesburg, Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. So at Aging Consulting Group, you help aging seniors and those with aging parents better plan ahead, and especially as it relates to the cost that's coming before them. And we work with family caregivers.
Yes.
So our concern is all around the caregiver, how to take the burden off of them and how to help them, give them the tools that they need to better prepare for what's coming.
Right.
So thanks for coming, and we're just going to dive into this.
That sounds great. Thank you for having me, Michelle. As always, it's good to talk to you. Now, at Aging Consultants Group, we're actually located in Chantilly, Virginia. My home is in Leesburg, Virginia. And we have been helping families really all over the Northern Virginia, D.C., Maryland area, and even some that are outside of that geographic area as well. And what we discovered as a financial planning group is that clients would come to us and they would ask us to help them with their aging parents or their spouse with the diagnosis of dementia, and realize that the classic financial planning didn't always really cover all the bases as it relates to something that's a little more demanding and perhaps even outside of the financial planning arena. And so when we think about an aging preparedness plan, which is really what we call our approach, and our aging preparedness program, which stretches over many years, is we want to take stock, first of all, of everything that is at someone's disposal to be prepared for what's to come in a caregiving scenario. And so really what that means is simply to, if I put my financial planning hat on, is what do you have currently, right? What are all your assets and how are they all titled? Whether or not you're in a caregiving situation, you want to understand how those are going to flow even after you're gone. And that sort of takes some of the burden off of families with that. The next thing in terms of potential caregiving is, how is your health and how is that going to progress? I think a lot of us don't think that we're going to have care needs when we get older. It's just something we kind of brush under the rug. The status quo is going to remain forever, but that's just simply not the case. And so coming to terms with that helps us understand that we all need to plan for a point in time when we're either going to give or receive care in some form or fashion. And then finally, or in addition to the health, is how is your home equipped to be a caregiving support system, if you will? Because when you turn the page into a caregiving situation, your home becomes the place where you will more than likely receive that care first. And it needs to be prepared to be able to do that and provide a functional support, as well as make sure that it's a safe environment as well. And so beyond the home, then we take a look at the human resource side of things. And that's going to be more, I think, more for most people, it's going to be family or informal caregivers. And now, when we go back to the asset parts of it and the income parts of it, it may be that you can afford professional caregivers. But I think that statistics bear out that the majority of people who are receiving or giving care are in an informal basis, which means simply unpaid caregivers or those who are part of your family or your circle of friends. And then beyond all that, in terms of aging preparedness, I think educating yourself on the supports that are out there, whether it's in community, public services that are available to you, or if it's private services that are available to you, understanding really how they function, how you engage in them, and honestly how much they cost, and when is the right time to engage those. So in terms of a plan, in terms of aging preparedness, you can see there's just a whole multitude of issues that you have to consider. And when people come to us brand new, they're overwhelmed by the number of things that they do need to consider. And so that's why when we do help our clients, we say it's not a sprint to find the answers to all of this. It's going to be a journey. And really all we want to do is understand where you are today and what's the next possible thing that we might need to prepare for. And then once we get determined around that, we can start thinking out further and further along that time horizon. And so that's really what we think about when we talk about being prepared. Now, as it relates to the family caregiver, I think that they're the ones that are going to feel overwhelmed in terms of, am I equipped? Do I have the tools necessary to do this effectively? I don't know what I don't know. Who can show me the ropes? Who can tell me the best practice for engaging in this caregiving role? And I think that what I've learned in terms of becoming more involved with the senior serving industry is that you just need to take it upon yourself to embark on an educational journey as well. And I think that for most caregivers, they have a tremendous heart. And I think that if you're doing what's right in your heart, you will find that that you also be educated well, because you'll prepare yourself in terms of assimilating that information and then putting your best foot forward as that caregiver to your loved one. So I think education is a big part of what we do.
Absolutely, and that same, the same applies to us, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're having this discussion. I think, when it comes to Alzheimer's, things can change so drastically, so quickly. And is it really happening quickly, or are we in a little bit of denial at the earlier stages? So what I love about what you do, it's so niche to me. I just don't hear of a lot of financial planners that are really helping families through the entire gamut. So families will say they don't want to put someone into a nursing home or memory care. Oh no, we can take care of it at home. And they'll think about just the day-to-day emotional part of taking care of someone at home, but they're not taking time to plan to say, okay, how can we make our home safe? How do we look at our situation, look at our home, look at some caregivers, spouses are still working, so how do we manage all of that? And you're able to really help them think about those things very early on, if we can get them there, right? So the key is, how do we get them talking, and how do we get them asking the questions? We're hoping that conversations like this will trigger something, and they'll be more apt to say, okay, let's take a deep breath. We have this diagnosis. Whether I'm an adult child or whether I'm a spouse, we now know that we're dealing with Alzheimer's. And we can think and talk all about the medical side of that, but how are we going to manage? How are we going to care for that? And Alzheimer's changes very quickly. I kind of said that and then I got off track for a second, but everything changes so quickly. So are you finding that people are coming to you in like a firefighting mode, or are you able to reach them a little bit earlier?
So it's a wonderful question, and I think if I take a step back and not just include Alzheimer's or dementia, but all issues as it relates to the aging process. And as I said before, whether it's dementia or if it's the aging process, it happens very gradually. And so it's that old sort of, image of a frog being in a pot of water and the water is slowly warmed until it comes to boiling. The frog doesn't know it's in danger. But if you throw him into a pot of boiling water straight away, he's frantic and he realizes there's something wrong. And so I think that that's true with all of us as we age. As I said before, the status quo we think will last forever. But I think that if we can educate ourselves on the progressive nature of aging, whether it's any one of our organ systems, and in the case of Alzheimer's, certainly the brain, that there's going to be a point on the horizon, and it's going to be a gradual sort of, whether you say ascension or descension, into greater needs of care, that we need to be realistic about that and plan as early as we can, for sure. I think that all of us have saved all of our lives for retirement. It's an accumulation of savings, and this new term now is once we've reached that sort of pinnacle, and we've retired, then it's called a decumulation of those assets in an orderly fashion to fund our retirement. Now, as it relates to caregiving, a lot of us don't necessarily think that we need to plan on income to meet, the expense of care needs, and it creates a higher level of income to do that. And so, the insurance industry responds to that by selling long-term care insurance. Well, that's certainly a great investment when you can make it, and if you can make it, to meet the demands of that higher income need for caregiving. But a lot of us just don't plan for that. And so for all of our clients, it's a matter of meeting them where they're at, and moving forward with a plan that really makes the best of whatever situation they're in when they come to us, financially as well as emotionally. And yes, a lot of them do come to us in a crisis mode. And it's, we knew this day was coming, we thought she was going to be fine, and suddenly it's a little stair step down in functionality, and we realize that there's a higher level of care needs. And as a family, we're already stretched. And I think that every caregiving family reaches that point. It's at some point in the future. It's a point where the needs become greater than their resources can really afford, whether it's emotionally or even financially. And so, one of the biggest challenges that we see is that will the caregiver outlast the person that they're giving care for, because there is such a toll on that caregiver.
Absolutely.
And so for us, when we meet with our clients, it's okay, whether you're in crisis or you're coming to us in a planning mode. The first thing we want to do is sort of, if you're in crisis, is triage the situation. Let's get you on the right track, immediately, and then take a step back and then educate you on what's going to happen from that point going forward, and then stay with you and take a look at the resources, and let's make sure that however we manage this, that we don't overwhelm the primary caregiver, because if that person can't withstand the added pressure and demand, then the whole family is disrupted more than just the realization that they've got a loved one with dementia that they've got to continue to care for. So I think the key behind a caregiving and planning situation is understanding that there is a progression. And so when I talked about sort of that decumulation and the income to meet your retirement needs and perhaps even increased care needs, you also need to overlap that and dovetail that with resources that are out there, and understanding what your palette of resources are that you can draw from. In the case of somebody with dementia, for example, or with an Alzheimer's diagnosis, we need to understand that in terms of the caregiver, there's caregiving support resources that are out there. That's probably the most important thing, is that and again, this is sort of wearing the social services hat a little bit in our practice, but making sure that they are in touch with those folks. They're not alone. They're not on an island. This happens with greater prevalence now as the population continues to age. But understand, and those resources are continuing because the population are aging. I'm happy to say that the resources are continuing to multiply through government funding, and certainly in the private industry as well, where they see opportunity. So, one of the greatest, I think, resources out there in our community, for example, here where we live, are adult daycare centers, for example. It's a great way for the informal caregiver to find respite in their day, and take them to a center where they're trained to really engage their loved one in activities, and really make them happy with that engagement, and also be able to take care of the caregiver as well. Support groups out there in communities like memory cafes, what have you, are ways that the caregiver can remain, I think, socially active, but also a salve for whatever might be challenging them in their day-to-day life as well. So education, understanding the resources that are out there in the community and how that sort of dovetails with, a financial plan out in the future that also helps to kind of lower anxiety. Unfortunately, money is at the center of a lot of anxiety as it relates to caregiving. And so being able to sort of, marry the two in a sort of frugal way, trying to get from here to there in a journey, and everybody's journey is so different. Michelle, it's remarkable. And at the center of it all is the family and the dynamics there.
So, Dave, we're big proponents of family collaboration. I think it just makes it so much easier for everyone involved, if there's not a lot of drama, that is. But, so when we're talking about adult children who have parents and one of them has dementia, or just one parent who has dementia, do you encourage families to sit down together and work on this plan as a family, or does that complicate things?
Well, as you probably well know, family dynamics are an incredibly variable component to this issue. Sometimes families are so close, and it's a joy, and they all willingly come together in a family meeting with us to talk about, both financial and care needs progressions, and many times people are quick to volunteer for different roles, whether it's, this brother is going to be the power of attorney for finance, or this daughter is going to be the, healthcare proxy for an advance directive, and or some families are just scattered geographically, as well as, unfortunately, sort of emotionally, they just are distant from each other, and so. But we meet them, of course, like anything else, where they're at, and typically, I would say the majority of times families do pull together and are ready to support the mother or the father, and in many cases the spouse, and I would say 75% of the time it's usually the oldest or closest geographically daughter to the parents that becomes really that close tie as it relates to another pair of eyes and ears on what the plan is and how it's going to progress. And I think that's important for the same reason that you would go in with a loved one to a doctor's appointment. If you're bracing yourself to hear some bad news or whatever, you want to have a second pair of eyes and ears to digest that information, and then be able to kind of document and then be able to relay that to the rest of the family. We love it when we have a family member with a spouse, for example, if the other spouse is the one needing care, to understand what we're telling that healthy spouse, that caregiving spouse, what the plans are and what education is necessary or what steps need to be taken. Because I think that other family member, that child perhaps, or a couple children, become coaches for their parents and cheerleaders, and are able to support and help sort of become a catalyst in getting some of these steps complete so that they are prepared. And so it also helps too that when the caregiver spouse is reacting in the moment to a crisis, that somebody else has a longer view that we've tried to impart to help calm that person down. Now let's remember what they told us in our meeting, that this is going to be okay, this is to be expected, this is not unusual. It's just a bump in the road perhaps. Or this is when we need to engage in that next level that we learned about. And so, but remember we talked about these options, and so I think that what we try to avoid is through a family planning approach and getting everybody involved on the same page, is that there are no surprises. I mean, there are going to be bumps in the road, but hopefully the emotional part of it is such a big deal that planning helps to sort of iron out those emotional highs and lows and create because ultimately, again, we're all going to age in different ways. We all want to have a good quality of life. And sometimes there's going to be issues that we have to contend with, whether it's cognitive issues or other functional capacity issues. But if we reach out to supports, those supports are there to help us maintain the highest quality of life given our infirmities, whether it's cognitive or functional. So having the family all on the same page is important to helping maintain that quality of life.
I agree, and I think we deal with a lot, and I'm sure you do too, I think across the gamut, whether you're dealing with medical issues, emotional issues, financial issues, caregiving is so overwhelming that it's our human nature is to sort of shut down. So even with the best intention, a spouse is at the doctor's office or at a meeting with, a financial planning meeting, and if they feel overwhelmed, whether it's from the information they're gathering at that meeting or just what happened this morning before they got out of the house, human nature is to kind of shut down. And then we have another dynamic where parents, they want to protect their children. So even though an adult child might be, perfectly dealing with way more than this actually, between work stress and children's stress and the things going on in life, parents like to shield their children. They're always their children. And the way they do that, we find so often, whether it's on purpose or not, is to just always kind of have that happy face and always, everything's fine. So what we encounter is families, adult children will reach out to us and they're like, I went home at Thanksgiving or I went home at Easter and I'm shocked at how bad my mother or father is. I had no idea it was that bad. I talk to them every week. I had no idea it was that bad. Mm-hmm. And so then becomes, enter a new firefighting stage where the kids are finally like realizing that, oh my gosh, this is way bigger than we thought it was. And now what do we do? Mm-hmm. Now what do we do? So are you able to, virtually, do you meet virtually now, in this new crazy I want to say post-COVID, but are we really post-COVID? In this world that we live in, you're licensed in Virginia. So are you able to help families outside of your geographic area?
Yeah, well, we certainly are. We're licensed all over. And so the important thing for us, we do meet with our clients virtually. I think we become technophiles of audio, video, really more than anything else, so we can maintain that relationship and that same level of support that we've grown accustomed to in person with our clients. Now, we still, fully vaxxed, and we still need to go to meet clients where they're at because some of our clients are in communities, whether it's assisted living or memory care, and we owe it to them to meet them where they're at because they're not going to hop on a Zoom call, and we need to be able to get eyes on and make an assessment. To your point, it's one thing to talk to somebody on the telephone, but until you see them physically and all their present glory of whatever infirmity they might have. It's important to be able to see that with your own eyes to then chart a course from that day going on. But I will say that, virtual meetings have really become fantastic because it allows for more family members that we just talked about to become involved with the discussion. We were able to share, documents with them virtually via their computer screens. To really support points that we're trying to make and next step scenarios that we need to anticipate. There's the emotional part of this is a big deal, and you're right. People do have a tendency to shut down when they get some news, and I think, even from my own perspective in my own life, if there's some sort of an emergency, I'm thinking with some of my children, where they've gotten into some sort of trouble, I'm not accustomed to dealing with that every day of my life, and so I don't know what my options are. Do I call an attorney? Do I reach out, to the school counselor? Should I reach out to a therapist? I don't know what to do because I'm not a professional, in whatever area it is that surprises me sometimes. So and I guess the easy way to put that is we don't know what we don't know.
Right. We say that all the time.
Right?
We say that all the time.
Yeah.
And we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know, therefore we don't know what to ask.
Yes.
Because we're, even at that very early stage of diagnosis as a caregiver or a spouse, I'm going to the doctor with my parent or with my spouse. I'm so overwhelmed at what you're telling me that I don't know how much I'm going to retain at all, other than Alzheimer's.
Right.
Or dementia. And I think, whatever that looks like, you then often see a lot of denial because it's not on purpose. People aren't saying that it's not possible for their loved one to have dementia. They just don't want to believe it, and therefore they want to do anything other than talk about dementia or pick up the phone and call and say, listen, this is what I was just told. Where do I begin?
Right.
So and again, human nature kicks in, and that's when we shut down. I do it myself when I'm completely overwhelmed, and I have a to-do list out, and with my dad and dealing with my mom, my mom was his primary caregiver. She had a lot of difficulty dealing with the dementia. She had a lot of problem communicating. Mm-hmm. Till the very end, she would ask him questions he was incapable of answering, and it would make him more stressful, and then it would make her more stressful, and it was just this, treadmill going nowhere.
Right.
And at the time, I think we were so, and this is not just our family, I think you see this across the board. I think families are so focused on the person with dementia that they forget to watch their healthy parent. And the stress of caregiving and the stress of having to do everything while you are perhaps sort of keeping other people, keeping, I don't want to say the truth, but keeping the reality away from people you care about because you don't want to burden them. Mm-hmm. It just takes the stress to a whole new level. And it creates, a whole new level. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. With the rising cost of memory care, and, it's extraordinarily expensive, and especially in certain areas of the country, the DC area where we are today, it's, extraordinarily expensive. So between the cost of long-term memory care and, that excludes people that just do not have the financial means to do that, to the other side of the fence where there are families that absolutely, even if they have the money to do it, they're not going to do it because they made a promise to their parent or they made a promise to their spouse that I will never put you into a nursing home. If something happens to either one of us, it's my job to care for you, and that's what we're going to do. And right. So because of that, there's no education happening about those later stages when perhaps the overwhelming stress of it all is too much to bear. Mm-hmm. So I would love for you to just briefly kind of touch on what are the number one things that you would want to recommend to families if they think they want to age in place? They want to care for their loved one in their home. What are the top things that they should be looking at? Absolutely.
So, and you're right. I think a majority of people, their reflex response to where would you like to age, even in the years where there may be some infirmity, right? It'll still be, I want to stay right here in my home. It's where my social connections are. It's where I'm comfortable with. But I will say though that you need to look at your home. I think I mentioned this before. Your home does become really a support mechanism. When we're raising our kids and when we're all normal and healthy, it's where we eat, sleep, and have parties and our family reunions but then suddenly when we have physical or cognitive changes, the home also needs to be able to keep you safe. And what was safe, 20 years ago is really probably not likely going to be safe when you've got some other functional incapacity, right? And so what I would recommend for someone who's going to be aging in place is, number one, you need to take stock, do an assessment, have somebody come in the industry, whether it's certified assisted professional to take stock, or an occupational therapist come in to take stock of your house to understand what's going to be safe for that loved one. Recommend any changes. Another thing I would recommend is, in terms of the educational component to it, is to visit a memory care assisted living facility. There's been a lot of progress over the years in what makes a great environment for people with cognitive, whether it's Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, live a high quality of life. How do they engage folks so that their days are meaningful and evoke a lot of good social responses, and they're just good for their mental well-being. And so that's some of the things that we've done early on, and even throughout our interacting with our clients, is to see what's new in these memory care facilities. And they've got all different types of activities on the schedule, as well as different different corners of their activity areas that really cater to folks who may revert back to a younger time in their maturation, where they're caring for a baby, or someone that's working in a workshop, or even a desk where they're going through the motions of making financial ledgers, or whatever they kind of revert to as part of their sort of habitual nature, if you will. And it gives them a sense of purpose. And I think that those who are sort of licensed or practice dementia caregivers watch how they interact with those that they are providing care for as well. And I know that there's educational opportunities out there for informal caregivers to learn some of those practices as well. And I just expect to be able to offer that same sort of activity with those that you're going to be caring for in your home. The other thing is to have that family meeting as well, and determine who's going to be that. Is it just going to be one person providing that care? Is it going to be a team of people? Can you coordinate schedules to be able to provide that level of care? There is an opportunity cost to somebody, I'm thinking more of the sandwich generation than anything else, who have to care for younger ones, but also for their parents if they've got dementia. And they've been working, they may be not able to work full time any longer to provide that care. So expectations just need to be set across the family as to who's going to play what role and when, and be able to coordinate that effectively. And then take a timeline look at it as well, and understand that there will be a progression. And to the extent that you want them to stay in home, I think that's fantastic. People have what I consider that sort of caregiving heart, or as some folks say, a caregiving gene that allows you to do that very effectively. And others just straight out say, I don't think I can do this. And
there's no shame in that. I'm going to just there's no shame in that. And I don't know how else to say it. There's just no shame in that. It is a lot. It is a lot.
Well, it's a lot, and I think that people also understand that even if you do want to step and become a caregiver, there is sometimes people lose the sense of being the daughter or the son or the spouse, because they're just caregiving all the time, and so sometimes it's helpful and even healthy to step back to the extent that you can, and find respite, and through planning, if there's some way then to disengage of being a caregiver and kind of get identified as that role that you kind of entered into this life contract with as a spouse or this son or daughter, then there's ways to maybe plan to do that. And I think that's where I feel like we do our greatest help is when clients come to us and say, thank goodness we're engaged, because we can see the forest for the trees. We understand where the minds are. We understand where the help is as well. And we realize that it's not the end of the world if I disengage as a caregiver and we engage some outside help as well. And again, I do like the fact that there's more and more needs-based support out there in the communities that are just growing. So it's just important to be able to investigate that, know where they're located, and how to engage, what the requirements are, how we can get there from here. And I mean, I didn't really want to bring this up during the talk, but eventually a lot of folks need to rely on the largest long-term care insurance provider in the country, and that's Medicaid. And that's, for a lot of folks, that's taboo. And I understand why that's the case. Nobody wants to give up a lot of their assets to be able to qualify for Medicaid. But in terms of the health and well-being of a caregiver, sometimes that's there could be a soft landing into a Medicaid situation in the ultimate. And I'm not necessarily supporting that direction, but I am saying
it's an option.
It's an
You're
option.
saying it's an option, and
Right.
I think that's important. It is. It's an option, and it's something that if you educate yourself early, you understand what it might look like. You might never need to go that direction, but knowing and kind of getting a little education so that you understand what options are available to you down the road is important. And I think kind of stepping back a little bit when you're looking at the home and the safety of the home, and there's so many simple things that can be done to make it a safer place for the person, for your loved one that has dementia. But at the same time, you can also kind of figure out a way or at least be open to creating some sort of respite area in your home for you as the caregiver. Maybe it's just a guest room or an office that you can convert to a quiet library if you like music, if you like art, if you like to read, where you can escape to your little
oasis.
And the value of that to the caregiver and the stress level of the caregiver, because it's immeasurable.
Right.
You don't have to feel like I can't leave my house, I can't leave my loved one, so I like to when I talk to families and try to kind of give them an idea, sending someone your way, I would put that on the list and ask them, when you're thinking about it, you're thinking about the obvious, the occupational therapy type of obvious things, the making it safe so that it's not a fall risk, and not a fall risk, or there's too much furniture, or the microwave is too high, and all the things.
Right.
But then there's also these opportunities for the caregiver to take care of their emotional well-being.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be an add-on. It can be just reprioritize, reprioritize the space. Reprioritize a corner as long as that's your corner.
That's
right?
a great idea.
Right?
Yes. I think that you're reminding me of some of our clients that do just that, and they've engaged. Okay, we realize that I can't do this 24/7, right? And we're going to hire a professional caregiver to come in, or maybe it's another family member comes in to provide that respite care. Okay, Mom, I'm going to come in every Wednesday for 4 hours, and it's going to be in the middle of your day when Dad's also, let's assume Dad has Alzheimer's, and Dad and I are going to work on this puzzle together. And so that's her opportunity to do whatever she wants. And I think the idea of an oasis somewhere in the house where you can go and engage in whatever activity that brings you sort of joy, right? Whether it's reading, whether it's knitting, whether it's tinkering in the garage if you're a gentleman.
Whether it's gardening,
gardening, for goodness sake, yes.
Gardening outside, but when families can kind of look at that and include that as part of the equation when you're looking at how to make things and adapt things the best way possible for your aging parents, I think that's something that really needs to be just as important as the occupational therapy for your loved one that has the dementia. It's the stress level is overwhelming, and I don't need to tell that to anyone who's dealing, everyone who's probably listening to this conference understands the stress that's involved in caring for someone, the unpaid caregivers.
That's right.
But I love also how you tackled and you talked about like adult day and some of these things where we try to make sure, and we've had a couple of these conversations that are a part of this event with adult day centers. And I think what families need to understand, and I know that we probably didn't understand this, we looked at adult day as an opportunity. My mom wasn't prepared to put my dad into memory care.
Right.
She was not capable, and her doctor was calling us and telling us, your mom has lost so much weight, she's
Right.
not sleeping. If you don't do something, you're going to lose your mom before you lose your dad.
Yeah.
And so we came to her and we told her that we'd like her to consider the next step, which in our case might have been memory care, and she wanted no part of that. So we were able to transition by using an adult day center.
Right.
We were looking at it strictly 100% just as an opportunity to take my dad somewhere where he was safe, so my mom had a day off
Yes.
to herself. What we did not ever even consider, and I say we, really me, I never really considered how wonderful that would be for my dad.
Right.
These are trained professionals who understand cognitive impairments, and they have the activities, and he came alive there, and also there wasn't no arguing.
Right.
Like the arguing that was happening at home. He was happy, so his joy and his happiness is gained while my mom is also gaining respite at the same time.
Right.
And that is what I feel like we lost, and now what we try to educate other families about is not only are you putting them in a situation where they're safe, but they are so well cared for, and there's also care managers that are part of the program, so they're going to be observing. And when they see something changing, a behavior changing, something physically changing, they're almost like our eyes on the ground.
Right.
Because at home, you're with your children, I don't see it. My relatives come from out of town and they look at my children and they're like, oh my gosh, you've grown a foot. And I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it because I'm with them every single day.
Yeah. You raise a great point. So one of the things, and I completely understand how it was difficult for your mom to, release your dad into a situation where he was being cared by somebody else. And I think that when we work with our clients, we want to kind of give them a glimpse of what's going to happen down the road. Not just, what's the next step that might happen, but we also do want to speak to the impact it has on them as a caregiver as well. And so, and we want them to be around for as long as they can be there to provide loving support, not just for their spouse, but also for their own children as well. And so what we've come to find is that we educate folks and tell them what's going to happen next. We tell them early, and we tell them often. Because what we've discovered, particularly as you age, is that to get your head wrapped around making a decision that changes the status quo at the house, like letting your spouse go to memory care or to even adult daycare, is a huge disrupting step. And so we have to do it in baby steps. This is how we've always done it, and say, okay, well, listen, first, and I'm just speaking empirically here with the clients we've met, and that is that first we need to take care of you, spouse. We're going to have a caregiver come in just once a week, so you've got that time, kind of like that oasis you can go to. We talked about,
right? And
they're like, okay, oh wow, I do. I feel a little recharged, and I don't feel so beaten down emotionally, and I'm not. And then, okay, well, let's. Did you like the way that caregiver engaged? And hopefully they've been certified in some dementia care practices. And yeah, I really like what he was doing with her. Okay, well, let's try adult daycare, and you can do 1 day a week. All right. And so, okay, we'll do 1 day a week. And suddenly it breathes new life, I think, into how the caregiver feels, but it also invites this new sense of a new normal, right? And realize that this new normal is actually, both are happy. Who would have thought?
Right.
We recently have a client who sent somebody to adult daycare, and she was like, "Oh, he's not going to like that." I just don't think he's going to like it. And then the day came for him to go over to tour it. Okay. And then she calls me back. She goes, I was surprised. He's pretty excited. And now it's been several months now. And, he goes 3 days a week, and suddenly she's got a lot of time on her hands. And the interesting thing I take away from this is when we have our monthly formal sort of review meetings with her and her daughter, she is so much more engaged with what's happening. And there were other things that were happening that she wasn't willing to share with me or with our group that have since come out, because she goes, let's just tell David and Steve about this, because there's something we could probably do, right? And that we're not seeing. And I think that really kind of goes back to the initial thing, and that is that people sort of seize up and are afraid to share because they either they're embarrassed or they just don't know that there's answers out there.
They don't know that there's answers. I think they just kind of shut down. Well, we are going to wrap this up, and I just can't thank you enough. But because you can work with families virtually, we will for sure, send any information that you would like to,
Sure.
From your organization. But how can people reach out to you if, it would be a virtual situation? How would you like people to reach out to you?
Well, Aging Consultants Group is the name of the company. My email address is my first initial D and last name Slupe, DSlupe, SLUPE at agingconsultantsgroup.com. You can visit us on the website, and you can click for an info link there as well. And then you can reach us via telephone as well. That's 703-956-6662. And we'd be happy to answer your questions. Our first consultation with any of our prospects or potential clients is always free, because a lot of it is just, again, getting to know one another and understanding how all this works. And we get that. And so if you are out in your community and you are looking for a financial advisor that might provide similar services, I would just look to see that they have some sort of training in extended care planning, and that they have perhaps some good relationships with whether you call them aging life care managers or geriatric nurse managers, or dementia care practitioners. Just because I think the one thing that we do is we sort of quarterback both some financial and care planning things. Now we do refer out to those care planning roles that we don't feel that we're necessarily equipped to do, but at least we understand and we have a perspective on the industry. And that's the important thing too when you seek out help in your own backyard, is that they've got a good sense of the landscape of the senior servicing industry that allows them to sort of quarterback those resources and really empower the family.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough. And like I said, we will share Dave's information in an email following this, and also like in the notes that this will be available on our website, and there'll be notes, and we'll attach all your contact information. But I can't thank you enough, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's a privilege to be here, and thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.